I'm Sarah Marley. I'm the interim executive director for Friends of the Wissahickon. And thank you. This is my first Valley Talk since I've taken on that role. And this is our first Valley Talk of 2025. So we're happy to have you all here. Before we get started with our excellent speaker and excellent show, I just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce Friends of the Wissahickon. So let me just advance the slides. So for those of you who aren't familiar, if we have anybody new here, Friends of the Wissahickon was founded in 1924, so we're 100 and wonderful this year. And we are a member and volunteer supported organization. And our mission is to conserve the natural beauty and wildness of the Wissahickon Valley and stimulate public interest therein. We do that, we realize that mission through a lot of work. And we kind of break our work up into three buckets: habitat restoration, infrastructure improvements, and engagement opportunities. And so some of the things that we were able to achieve last year, I just wanted to share. We stewarded and improved over 38 miles of trail. We have about 50 miles of trail, 50 plus miles of trail in the park. So that was a great achievement that we were able to do with all of our amazing volunteers. We had over 2,000 volunteers last year. We also removed 17 tons of litter from the park. Again, we wouldn't be able to do that without our amazing volunteers. And we offered lots of engagement and educational opportunities to engage the public in our work to steward this really important resource. So I'd like to invite you all to join us. If you're not a member, please become a member. That's a way to support our work. If you'd like to come out and join us as a volunteer, all are welcome. We're out there working 4 or 5 days a week sometimes. No experience is necessary. And if you're looking to explore the park, we offer many free guided hikes where you can get to know the community that cares for the park and get to know the park really well. We also have a free app that you can download on your phone. I like to think of it as the free key to the Wissahickon. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Bill Konstant. He is the senior author of Jewel of the Wissahickon, Rewilding the Dixon Meadow. He is a Flourtown resident and a career wildlife conservationist whose travels span the globe and whose career includes the creation and protection of natural parks and nature reserves in Africa, Asia, North and South America. Bill and his co-author Glenn Mason have spent the last 2 years hiking in the Wissahickon and its surroundings so they might document the seasonal changes in its ecology and present us with this portrait of a natural treasure. So without further ado, welcome, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is my second presentation about this book, which was a project that came from 2 years of hiking the Wissahickon, photographing along the Wissahickon with a colleague, Glenn Mason, who's there. He's the one with the real camera, as you can see. I personally don't like the big lenses because they're heavy to hold and you can't hold them straight. And I have something that's better for pointing and shooting, but it gets good results. The project began with hiking along the Wissahickon and Dixon Meadow, and not just with Glenn, but with my dog. This is Blue. Some of you may have met him on the trail. I figured it out. Blue lived to almost 16 years old, which is a long time for a dog that size. It's part husky and part Karelian bear dog. Figured it out over the 14 years that he was with my wife and myself. He and I walked halfway around the world along the Wissahickon, over 10,000, 11,000 miles. Anyway, in the process of doing that and taking photographs, Glenn and I put together a presentation or presentations for the White Marsh Foundation and the Dixon Meadow. And a board member of the White Marsh Foundation, a woman, after like the 7th or 8th presentation, because we're doing them seasonally, spring, summer, fall and winter, said, you ought to write a book. We had all the photography, so sitting and writing was no big deal. And we dedicated the book to Paul Meyer, who was the director at the Morris Arboretum, because he was largely responsible for creating the Dixon Meadow and managing it. The meadow was created as a water mitigation or mediation project to reduce flooding from the Erdenheim farm area and the hill at White Marsh down across the road and across the fields and into the Wissahickon Creek. But just instead of just making it a mechanical mitigation project, Paul figured out a way to do it and made it an ecological restoration project by creating a pond, creating a meadow around the pond and a nascent woodland around that and managing it. And that's what attracted the diversity of wildlife to that area. A very real, really important project, small, but really important. Unfortunately, Paul passed away before the book was published. Foreword for the book is written by Dr. Jane Goodall. And this is taken at the Elmwood Park Zoo with Noah the eagle. Some of you may have seen him. He used to appear, I don't think he does anymore, but he used to appear at the Philadelphia Eagles game. I'm sorry? Oh, at the Eagles games? Fantastic. He doesn't fly because he fell from a nest many years ago up in Massachusetts, or maybe it was Vermont. And he had injuries to his head and one of his eyes. Basically, he's blind in one eye, so he can't fly. The bird that flies comes from the bird that flies at the Eagles games comes from Dolly Parton's ranch, or whatever it's called down there. Anyway, Jane wrote the foreword for this book because the project that was conducted, the book project itself, was a roots and shoots project. If any of you know the Jane Goodall Institute, you know they have roots and shoots programs all over the world for people of all ages, very young kids to, well, in this particular case, for senior citizens. Anyway, the book is about a project that began over a decade ago in land that was originally it was forested and woodland, but in modern times was farmland, cattle pasture. This is what it looks like in its glory, if you will. So there's a pond, there's a marsh around the pond, and then there are trees planted around that. And the whole idea is to keep that dynamic going. Don't let the woodland take over. Don't let the pond fill in. Keep the different environments functional and active and vibrant, and that will attract the wildlife. And of course, what happens there ultimately has an impact on the Wissahickon, which is right here outside the Valley Green Inn. Now, the land on which this project takes place, and land on which we're sitting here tonight or gathering here tonight, was originally inhabited by indigenous people, and they put up with the Swedes, with the Dutch, and then the British, and finally William Penn was granted this land. So there was a famous treaty in which the Penn's land grant was made official, and they gave up their rights to the land, and over a century or so moved out. By the time of the American Revolution, they were long gone on their way west past the Mississippi. A lot of the Lenape wound up in Oklahoma and points west. Other things that left were the American chestnut. We lost that due to hunting or anything like that, gathering, but to disease. And the timber wolf, gray wolf, used to roam these woodlands. It was hunted out, basically hunted out of the lower 48 states nearly until it was reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park and is now spreading again. The mountain lion, puma. This animal has so many different names, more than I think any other mammal. This is the Nittany lion, if you will. Bison. There were bison here in Pennsylvania. You can see these are at the Elmwood Park Zoo. They're up in the Allentown area as well. And they were nearly exterminated, save for several populations that have been breeding and expanding and repopulating the wild, but nowhere near their numbers, which were in the tens of millions. And the elk, this is an animal. The bison and the elk are also from these are shots from the Elmwood Park Zoo. The elk was hunted out of Pennsylvania and then reintroduced some years ago with animals from the Rocky Mountains. So you can see elk today out in Western Pennsylvania. And there's a famous story about Edgar Allan Poe floating down the Wissahickon and seeing an elk up in the woods there. And he did. It wasn't a wild elk. It was a captive elk. Because in the day, people with some money, spare change, discretionary funds could purchase elk calves that were taken out in the northern and western parts of the state and keep them in their backyards, if you will, even in Chestnut Hill. So the Dixon Meadow is bordered by cattle pasture. This is the Angus tract. There's also belted cattle there, and they're still there. They live side by side with the new wildlife that has inhabited the meadow. And one of the first things that was done, and one of the first things that Paul Meyer had arranged for, was to dig the pond. Okay, so in the book, there's a chapter called "If You Dig It, They Will Come." I'm not above stealing from movies and such. So, but that alone won't bring all the wildlife that one would desire. And it's important to remember here that no animals have been introduced to this area. Any of the animals that have come on their own into the meadow, into the preserve. The plantings that were done not just to provide habitat, but also to reduce the water runoff. So there were little breaks and channels and that sort of thing with rocks and vegetation adjacent to it, which would reduce the flow of water, reduce the speed, reduce the volume, and keep water in the soil to nourish the plants, which attracts the insects and everything else. The plants are not just shrubs and trees, but grasses and sedges. And these provide homes for cottontail rabbits that hop across the road and find themselves in a wonderful area in which they can hide, in which they can breed, produce babies there. The flowering plants that were put in, a wide variety of them, dozens of different species, attracted insects from neighboring environments. And the insects become food for birds such as the bluebird, and that spawned a project that was initiated by the folks at the Hill at White Marsh, a series of bluebird nesting boxes. I think about a dozen of them throughout the meadow. These boxes not only attract bluebirds, but they attract the tree swallows. In fact, they probably attract more tree swallows than they do bluebirds. And that's the case pretty much anywhere in Andorra Meadow, Houston Meadow, Fort Washington State Park. There are bluebird nest box projects there. The bluebirds are, it's benefiting them, but the tree swallows have basically won that battle. but both are winners. This slide demonstrates an addition to the boxes, and it's these twigs that are one of the residents at the hill, White Marsh, said, you know, why don't we put something on the boxes in which the birds can perch instead of just the box itself? Very smart idea, and that created this new dimension to a very practical conservation project that gives these birds a little arena in which they can joust for position and compete for mates, that sort of thing. The water attracts the frogs. If you have a little pond in your backyard, the green frogs will show up, the bullfrogs will show up. They'll show up. They showed up at the meadow, and then the crows showed up after them. And they'll have their meal right there on the boardwalk for you to watch. It's disgusting, but you know, that's nature. And the herons come in as well for the frogs. Now, there are no fish in the Dixon Meadow Pond, whereas there are plenty of fish in the Wissahickon. And that's because they didn't put fish in. Will fish eventually get there? They're not going to cross the road. If they get there, how do you think they'll get there? Yeah, duck feet. Yes, exactly. Ducks will very likely, mallards, you know, the puddle ducks will be in another water, a pond or a lake or a creek or whatever. And as they're paddling around, fish eggs may get caught up in their webbed feet, and they go to the next pond and populate that pond. One of these days, that's going to happen in the Dixon Meadow. Snakes crawl across the road and through the fields to be eaten by hawks. That's their only purpose in life. Seriously. This red-tailed hawk, who I think is one of two that calls the Dixon Meadow its home. We call him Dixon, no matter which red-tailed hawks we see there, we call him Dixon. It's easy that way. He caught two snakes at one time. He's eating one of them with one that he's pulling from one foot, and he's got another one under the other foot. But I wasn't able to get both of them in the shot at the same time. Cooper's hawks, also another predator that they come in low, and they come in after the birds more than the snakes. One bird you're almost guaranteed to see on any given day that you go to the meadow is the mockingbird. And we have in the book a chapter called Mimic, not Mocker. And this is a bird that can mimic the sounds of not only other birds, but ambulances, you know, car horns, you name it. It can do that. It does a really good job. And I think there's something like 8 different bird species that are its favorites around the country. Some university did a study on that. And on any given day, you will be greeted. Yes, you might even be greeted at the gate by a mockingbird. First birds to arrive in the spring are the red-winged blackbirds. They're showy. They're loud. The males, especially, we used to call them sergeants when we were kids for the stripes on their wings. And so the males are the ones that you're going to see most, but the females are there making noise as well. And this is in as early as February. They come back. They do migrate, go south, come back in early February and March. And the females are typically down in the reeds at the base of the plants, which is where they build their nest, but they sometimes come up and sing as well. They're not as elegant, if you will, as the males, but they do sing very well, as do the males. Lots of other blackbirds come in the spring as well. And sometimes the sky is kind of darkened by them if you get there at the right time. Not in the meadow, but here along the Wissahickon, one of the first plants that you will see in the spring. Does everybody know what this one is? The skunk cabbage, that's right. And It comes up looking like a cabbage. This is the leafy part of the plant, not the reproductive part. The reproductive part, the flower, is this chamber in which a rotten smell, from which a rotten smell emanates, and that attracts flies, which are the pollinators of the skunk cabbage. The plant can break through the snow. It's one of the few plants that actually produces heat. We consider we're mammals and we're heat producing, and we look at reptiles and we send amphibians and they say, well, those are cold-blooded. Well, this is a hot-blooded plant. It actually produces heat enough to melt the snow, one of the first ones to come up in the spring. An animal you won't see unless you turn over rocks and logs and things is the redback salamander, which lives during the day under rocks and logs and then comes out at night. It has no lungs. It breathes through its skin. It's a lungless salamander. But again, you won't see it unless you turn over rocks and logs and stones. And I recommend that you do that as you're walking through the woods. Put them back the way that you found them, but you will find some very interesting. You'll find plants growing under a log. They're white, there's a little bit of green, and you say, how is this plant growing without any sunlight whatsoever? These are the small miracles of nature. Early in the spring, maybe even before March 21st, you can see turtles in the ponds. This one, I believe this is at Morris Arboretum, and they're out sunning. They're not mating. They look like they're mating. They're just stacking themselves because that's their typical behavior. And this is the red-eared slider, which many of us knew when we were kids as the dime store turtle, the one that you would get with the little habitat and the ant eggs and that, and they wouldn't survive, or you'd let them go. And they're southern species that have moved up north. They like it here. They basically have become naturalized here. And like I said, it's amazing to me that the first turtle to appear in the spring would be a southern turtle. You'd think they'd be the last ones. In February or March, not long after the blackbirds arrive, the bluebirds are looking to set up house, and they're here all year long. I used to think that bluebirds would come only in the spring, robins would come only in the spring, but they're around all year long. We just don't get out as much as we maybe should in the winter months, and we don't see them, but they're here. They're year-round residents, and they're starting to show up at the same time that the plants are starting to blossom. And this is a red maple. That's what it looks like when it's first coming out of its dormancy. The mushrooms, fungi, they start growing. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to them. This is the pheasant tail, I think it's called, mushroom, common name. These are excellent eating. Does anybody here eat mushrooms? That's somebody in the back. Yeah, these are great. You slice them up a little bit, saute them a little butter, shallots, and white wine. Fantastic. Anyone? Is that the same thing as Dutchman's breeches? Okay. Yeah, we see these, the ones you will buy in the nurseries are the pink and red varieties, the bleeding hearts. This is the natural relative of those. And we tend not to, when we're hiking in the woods, when we're walking along the creek and that, we tend to be looking at eye level or up because most people are birders and they're looking. We don't look down as much as we should. That's why we trip a lot. But if you do look down and you explore the woods here and in other parks, you may see things like the bloodroot. This is a beautiful white flower called bloodroot because its roots are red. And May apples, which emerge in April, they're coming up now, and they produce a each plant produces, it's a ground cover, but each plant produces a single fruit that looks apple-ish. You don't want to eat it because it will make you very, very sick. And then the Virginia bluebell. There's a town called Bluebell, right? Which originally was called Pigeon Town, named after the passenger pigeon. And then the passenger pigeon went extinct, and the town got itself a new name. Other songs you'll start to hear in the spring, or sounds, the Carolina wren, which for my money has the biggest voice for the smallest bird. It really is powerful. It's and that's another weird one. There's the house wren and there's a Carolina wren, and you would think the Carolina wren would be the one that would go south in the winter, but it's the house wren that does. And the Carolina wren stays all winter long. You don't hear it during the winter because the song is that of the male, and that starts in the spring when he is trying to attract a female. Another vocal bird at this time of year is the song sparrow. Beautiful song, and it's up in this one is up in a redbud tree, and we'll talk a little bit more about redbuds in a minute. But talking about bird sounds, this was a gentleman by the name of Ted Parker, who could identify over 4,000 species of birds by their sound alone. Ted was born and raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I worked with him for a couple of years at Conservation International. He wound up donating 10,000 recordings or more to Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology to their sound. Unfortunately, he was killed at 40 years old in a plane crash in Ecuador. But he was from Lancaster. He, at 18 years old, broke the record for the big year, number of bird species seen in North America, or I'm not sure if it's North America or United States in a year. Yeah, at 18 years old, he broke the record. It's been broken since. Among the birds that people are really interested in seeing, most birders in the spring, are the warblers. They're coming back. The spring migration's coming up, and I have to. I'm not a good birder. I recognize some species, but that's not my forte. This is I can tell you what this one is. This is a bay-breasted warbler that actually hit my back window, my big picture window. And I thought, oh no, this poor bird. I went down outside, took the bird and held it in my hand and put it on the bench. And it looked at me like this, and 10 seconds later it flew away. So no harm, no foul. This is the black and white warbler that tends to moves up and down. It flits around. I think warblers are the bird from which the word flit really came from. That's what they do. They flit, they bounce, they hop. And this one has a tendency, like the nuthatch, to do so upside down. I find them amazing birds. See, here's one flitting, jumping, whatever. This is the yellow rumped warbler. It also has yellow on that. This male has yellow on the wing. This is the chestnut-sided warbler. Beautiful birds. The northern Parula, and it is considered a warbler. And a male or American redstart, again, considered within the warbler family. Beautiful birds. They come in mass in the spring. They haven't, usually May, I think, is probably the best month to see them coming back. And then you see the migration in September. But the spring migration is the one that's most desirable because they're in breeding plumage and so they're more attractive. Roger Torrey Peterson called them the butterflies of the bird world. the warblers, because they're such beautiful birds. And James Bond wrote about them. Not James Bond 007, but I think many of you may know James Bond was an ornithologist here in Philadelphia, the real James Bond. And he worked at the Academy of Natural Sciences. That's him on the left. Scary looking character. More scarier than, 007. And he was down in the West Indies. He wrote a book called The Birds of the West Indies. And it was a book that Ian Fleming, the author, had. He was a birder, and he was down in the West Indies, and he met James Bond there, and he said, "God, your name is great, for a spy." And he just used it, and I don't think the real James Bond got anything from it. Anyway, one of the first insects you'll see in the spring is the morning cloak butterfly, which, unlike most other, but it does not migrate from here to go south. It spends the winter as an adult under the bark of trees. So this is a fallen log. I think it was up in Andorra, and just happened to come out on a sunny day in February. So it's not your typical butterfly, but it's one of the first insects to emerge come springtime. I'm sorry? That morning cloak. Yes. The Jack in the Pulpit. Again, these are things they're not showy, but they're unusual. And you do have to make it a point to be looking for them. Lady's slipper orchid, which was thought to have gone extinct or been extirpated, removed from the Wissahickon. But I understand that some have been found not too far from here. No? No, not, oh, and I should point out, not all these shots are from Dixon Meadow. Okay. The point being made here is that the Dixon Meadow is part of the Wissahickon watershed. Okay. And it's a jewel in the sense that it has been restored from cattle pasture to become a working environment. And there are connections between the two. So what happens at the Dixon Meadow in some way, shape, or form is related to what's going on outside the window here. And this is, I said we'd get back to red buds. This is the flower of the red bud tree, which doesn't only emerge from the twigs and the branches, but actually grows from the trunk of the tree. Excellent on a salad. You can just pick them right off, put them on a salad, have a sort of a nutty taste. I'm learning what's out. My wife thinks I'm crazy, not just for that, but fiddlehead ferns, mushrooms, those sorts of things, onion grass. There's a lot out there that it's actually quite healthy for you. Pine needles in your tea. But these you can pick right from the tree, right from the, this is a good time of year to do it. And just wash them off and throw them on top of your salad. One of the tallest trees we have around here is the tulip tree, not the tulip poplar. It's not a poplar, although that's what we call it. It is a tulip tree named for the shape of its flowers and its leaves, and it's one of the first ones to go in to bloom in the spring. And of course, the blooming trees and flowers and plants attract insects, pollinators. This is a fly that masquerades as a bee, and I'm not quite sure what flower that is. So a botanist might recognize it. And then there are insects that imitate butterflies rather, and moths. This is a clear wing. It's a moth, and I have them summertime, spring. To say this is a spring arrival is probably stretching it. Summer would be more to the point, but it mimics the hummingbird. We have only one species of hummingbird here, the ruby-throated. This is the female, which doesn't have the classic ruby throat of the male. But of course, other non-insect invertebrates like snails, they come out. They're not coming out for the flower blooms, but they're coming out for the plant, the emerging green plants. And the aphids, snails kind of chomp off bits of the plant. The aphids suck the juice from the plants. And if you have aphids, well, you better hope that the ladybugs are not far behind, because they're the main predator of the aphids. And of course, the insects are just going wild at this point in time. They've arrived, they're feeding on the plants, and now they're mating with one another, like these flies. And these beetles, they can do two things at once. They can mate, they can have a meal. And the swallowtail butterfly caterpillars, these are the ones this is the back end of the caterpillar. These are eye spots on the back that biologists believe evolved in order to distract and confuse the predators. Predator will go for that, thinking, oh, that's the head, that's the face, that's the most vulnerable part. It is the most vulnerable part, but it's a part that if they attack, the caterpillar can still survive. And this is the one, if you grow parsley in your garden, the black swallowtail butterfly will lay its eggs, and the caterpillars will have a feast on your parsley. And of course, the one we all know the best, the monarch caterpillar. So that's all going on. The insects are just going crazy in the spring, and as the spring approaches the summer, and so they're building up. Everything's building up. The populations are building up. The numbers of all these plants and animals are increasing, and that's something to remember, because it can't stay that way. It can't grow and not be reduced at some point. So something's going to be prey for something else. Something's going to leave and repopulate another area. We have an expert on cicadas here, sitting in the third row over there. Wonderful book about cicadas. This is one, I think this is one of the 17-year cicadas, Doug, yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think we're due for that again this year or next year.
In the Midwest.
In the Midwest, okay. These amazing life cycles where these animals live below ground for most of their lives and just come out for a brief time to entertain and scare us. And then there are the other invertebrates that prey upon their relatives, if you will, orb web spiders. Then there are wasps that eat the spiders, but wasp paralyzes the spider, drags it down into its nest, and lays its eggs in the spider, and the baby wasps hatch, and they basically feast on the spider. Gross stuff. And dragonflies, which are the aerial predators, they attack other insects from above. Damselflies, which these are mating, so they make this nice little heart shape. So it's a Hallmark card, I think. And then the praying mantis or mantids that eat all the ants and other smaller insects. Now, the mantises that we have around here are not native. They're European and Asian mantises, Chinese mantis and European mantis. There is a Carolina mantis, but it's been basically pushed out by these invaders. I don't know when they came, how they got here, but they find it the area to their liking. And then robber flies, we don't see these normally, but they're out there, and they're predators on other insects. So there's a lot of cannibalism, if you will, that's going on. Assassin bugs that are eating other insects. It's not just the birds that are preying on the insects, but the invertebrates themselves. And of course, but the birds do eat insects and mollusks and that, like this sandpiper at the meadow, going around pecking in the soil for animals without backbones. This grosses a lot of people out. This is a snake eating a fish at along the Wissahickon Creek. The fish, not all the fish in the creek are native. Each year we have stocking. That's done by the game and, is it game and fish? Fish and game, okay. It's nothing technical, as you can see here. They get a bucket and they throw it in, and it does provide recreation. The trout that they put in are from California. We're talking about rainbow trout and brown trout. The native trout is the brook trout, and there are not many of them still around. If it weren't for the stocking, we wouldn't have any trout here, and they don't last all year. I mean, the waters here get a little bit too hot and move too slow, and they're not oxygenated. So as you go farther down the creek toward the Schuylkill, the waters are deeper, they're cooler, more oxygenated, and the trout may actually remain there and breed there for the next year. But as you go up the Wissahickon, that's not the case. Of course, the birds love it. This is a green heron. I was watching this thing, and it's stretching its neck out as it's walking. The most comical thing I'd ever seen. I wish I had video of this, because it just looked like he was doing this for some movie role or something like that. And to give you an idea of the size of the fish that come out of the Wissahickon, that great blue heron, it swallowed that thing down and then flew away. Ospreys fish from overhead. They come down, they dive and catch their prey. And then, of course, we have the bald eagles that have returned. The Delaware Valley population is burgeoning, is growing very, very, very well, has been for a number of years now. So we see these, and this photo was taken right above the creek, down behind the Bethlehem Pike and the professional center there on the bridge that used to be a railroad bridge. And if you go there during breeding season at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, you can see the eagles fly right overhead. I mean, you're basically at eye level with them. Springtime, summertime brings the toads. They are very vocal. They use what are called these vernal pools, temporary, if you will, waterways or water catchments. And this is one of the young. My title for this is George Washington. The turtles cross the roads to get to the meadow. Spotted turtles. Actually, this one is in the Wissahickon, not spotted turtle, painted turtle, and a red-bellied turtle. This painted turtle is the one, the smaller one on the left. The red-bellied is the larger one on the right. And this is actually in the Wissahickon Creek, not at the meadow. But we do have painted turtles at the meadow. And in the woodlands, we have the box tortoise, which used to be much more numerous than they are today, but they're holding on. Garter snakes, it's the most common of the snakes that we have. You have them in your backyard. There's also the brown snake. Again, this is one where turn over a rock and you're likely to see it. You won't otherwise. And the ringneck snake, beautiful little tiny snake. Some of them, I mean, they're probably 3, maybe 4 inches long and might get to 10 inches. That would be a big one. And the spring brings back the Canada geese. They never leave, really. They're here all winter long, but the breeding population returns in the spring. And they used to be rare. They used to be rare. When I was a kid, they were rare. Summer birds, a little bit less commonly seen, scarlet tanager, Baltimore Oriole. They're up high in the trees. They're hard to get in the lens. They're the pileated woodpeckers. Now, obviously, in the meadow, you don't have the woodpeckers because you don't have the tall trees and that, but they're around. Might be even in your backyard. The ones we see, and again, see them all year round, are back and breeding in the summer. The robins. They have an egg that is an internationally recognized color, robin's egg blue. And what you and I would, if we were to name it, we would call the red-headed woodpecker, but this is not a red-headed woodpecker. This is a red-bellied woodpecker. And you very rarely see the red on its belly. These are the cavity nesting birds, woodpeckers, and they're very, very accommodating. Will nest at eye level or even below. And we did have for a while, the turkeys were prominent around here, but I haven't seen very many of them in recent years. Although I hear that down in Jersey, they're doing really well. There are populations of animals that are cyclical, and they may not be abundant for a while, but then all of a sudden they'll come back. So muskrat, don't see them that much, but they are vegetarians. They're in the creek. I don't believe they've been sighted at the meadow. Raccoons are everywhere. We don't usually see them because they come out at night. And of course, we're having a boom with foxes. I've got fox in my backyard now. They started coming in the week after Blue passed away, basically saying, okay, now it's safe. And of course, everybody's friend, the white-tailed deer that eats all the native vegetation you might want to plant. But we have a sanitation crew up there that takes care of all of the carnage that results from these populations ebbing and flowing. The Wissahickon is beautiful in the fall. Fall comes around. It's spectacular. It's a paint every day. It's a painting. And the trees now and the bushes and shrubbery are producing seeds and berries. Really fantastic harvest for those animals that need to store up for the winter, make their migration, that sort of thing. Goldfinches feast on thistle. And even the insects are now gearing up for their migration south. Monarch butterflies come through. Have any of you been to Cape May and watched and seen the butterflies there during usually October, I guess, is a good month for that? Well, they do a tagging program there so that they can identify these animals as they move south. The number of tags that are retrieved and identified is small, but it's enough to give them a good sense of what's happening and what the numbers are and what environmental threats there might be. And the warblers come back in the fall, through here in the fall, heading south. But again, it's not as spectacular a migration as in the spring. And the geese and the ducks, same thing. This is not at the marsh, not at the meadow. This is actually up in Washington's Crossing. But they're heading out, and they're noisy, and we know it. Squirrels stick around, gray squirrels. And any of you seen the black squirrels? Yeah, you don't see too many of them, and it's the same species. It's just a different color form. Deer go into rut. Males sort of move off on their own and mate with the females, the does, and the winter comes. And the Wissahickon, again, it's beautiful in the winter. I think this is the only covered bridge within the limits of a major city here. One of my favorite times to hike. although I slip a lot on the ice. Again, if you look under rocks or peel back some bark, this is a bat under the bark of a tree, hibernating or remaining dormant. There are different levels of dormancy. Some animals are true hibernators, others just go dormant. And chipmunks on a warm day, they'll come out, whereas groundhogs will not. It's winter, and you would think that breeding and raising babies is the last thing that would be on any animal's mind. It is not the case. The great horned owl in January will begin mating and producing chicks. And in your backyard, we have, incredible avian fauna that sticks with us all year long, and birds that we kind of take for granted a little bit. But someone coming from another country would look at a blue jay and say, "Oh my God, that is one of the most beautiful birds I've ever seen." Titmouse, cardinals, even the female cardinal is quite a striking bird. The house finch is here all year round. Juncos come down. We're the southern limit of their migration. They'll head back up north during the warmer months. I found that best suet to put out for the birds in the winter, if you don't like squirrels eating all the food, is the hot pepper suet. The birds love it, doesn't bother them at all. Squirrels don't like it. They will not go to it. But the birds will eat it, they'll just chow down on it. Nuthatches, downy woodpecker, red-bellied woodpecker, northern flicker, starlings or pigs. But they're here during the winter. They came back in the early 1900s. Some idiot decided that all the birds in Shakespeare's plays should come to New York, and so let them go in Central Park. And here's a squirrel on the suet feeder, but notice it's not the red pepper suet. That was a mistake. Built a little pond in our backyard, my wife and I, and the animals. It's their drinking fountain, so the mourning doves love that. And of course, the Cooper's hawks love the fact that we're bringing all these birds in and giving them such a nice menu. And again, the foxes are prowling the backyard. They're looking really healthy. It used to be that they were kind of mangy looking. No, this year's crop is very healthy. That's one in the backyard, running up to the bird feeders, hoping for something to eat. Now, this area is fantastic for recreation. And here's out at the meadow. These folks are out there for the day, wanting to get their shot of Dixon the hawk, or the mockingbird, or sandpipers. And does anybody here use eBird? Okay. There was a bird called a Say's phoebe that came through, very rarely seen east of the Mississippi. And this was a couple years ago, I believe. And it came, and all of a sudden the parking lot was filled, and people were parked all up and down Flourtown Road to see the Say's phoebe. I think the species number now is up, it's close to 190 birds at the meadow, which is an incredible number. It certainly wouldn't be anywhere near, wouldn't be a tenth of that if it was still cattle pasture. Yeah, 100 all years, 190 this year, 52. The Wissahickon attracts all kinds. This was New Year's Day a few years back. Out for a walk. Hey, are you going to tell him what he looks like? Not me. He might be the audience. People of all ages hiking. This is a hike, the Batona Hiking Club. They have an annual hike from Center City to Chestnut Hill, and then they go to Iron Hill Brewery for lunch. It's like a 14-mile hike. It's great. Runners of all sizes, sexes, ages, bikers, even in the rain. This gentleman bikes from the Flourtown area up to Fort Washington State Park to fill the bird feeders every day. That's his job. And this was just happened to be a rainy day. And that's right outside, taken a few years back. I don't know what happened to the rest of his bike. And all year long, people are skiing, hiking, sledding, painting, just chilling. This is my grandson, and this is at the Dixon Meadow. And this is something he'll always remember, the woolly bear caterpillar that he saw this day. And he learned the story that you can predict when, like the groundhog, you can predict what kind of winter it's going to be by looking at the color and if it's banded or not. But he was very curious about the caterpillar that day. So there's stuff to do for everyone at the meadow along the Wissahickon. I want to thank some people for their participation in this book project. The editor, Lucy Noland, is here with us tonight. She was also the editor for a memoir that I wrote a few years ago called Wrestles with Wolves. It's not about wolves, just like Dances with Wolves wasn't about wolves. I want to thank Troy Bynum for his photography. Most of the warbler pictures that are in the book are his. He's an excellent photographer, and he leads lots of tours and programs here at the Wissahickon. I want to thank Kim Shepard, who is the director of the White Marsh Foundation and made this project possible. She couldn't be with us here tonight. She's in the Galapagos. She wins. And news that I just received, or we just received last week, Jewel of the Wissahickon was chosen as a finalist in the International Best Indie Book Award, which will be the ceremony, or the award ceremony will be held in St. Paul, Minnesota in May. Unfortunately, I won't be here, but Lucy's going to go to see if we get the gold or the silver or the bronze. We definitely have silver. Okay. And just to let you know that the book, we have them here tonight. If anyone would like to buy a copy and sign, they retail for $55 and are available at Booked in Chestnut Hill. But tonight the special deal is I'll sign one for you for $50, and it has. I don't have electronically. I'm a dinosaur, except for cameras. So it would have to be a check or cash. But tonight I will be happy to sign a book for anyone who wants one for a $50 contribution to the White Marsh Foundation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. That was amazing. So we wanted to open up for some Q&A. So I think we would take some questions from the room. I didn't see any from our Zoom participants just yet, but we'll give them a couple minutes. So if you've got questions on Zoom, please submit them. But does anybody have any questions for Bill?
Yes.
Just make sure you repeat the question.
I will repeat the question. Thank you. Parking, there's parking right outside what they call the farmhouse there. Oh, that's right. Where do you park if you visit the Dixon Meadow? There is a farmhouse there, and there's a parking lot at the farmhouse. You just walk a little bit. Okay.
Are there coyotes across from the meadow?
Are there coyotes across from the meadow? There are coyotes everywhere right now.
Sorry, just want to address some mic issues here.
Okay.
Mhm.
Are there coyotes in the Dixon Meadow? They come through the meadow on a regular basis. I've seen them not in the meadow itself. I've seen their scat in the meadow on the trails that you're walking. They are becoming quite habituated, I would say is the word, to people. I saw one a couple weeks ago and had crossed through the meadow and had gone into the farmland on the other side of the road. I've seen them on Mill Road by Stenton, just walking across the road. So they're here. My understanding is that they're not doing bad at all. That a lot of them are feeding. If you talk to the people at Fort Washington State Park, you know, the rangers and that, the coyotes are feeding off roadkill. But yeah, they come through the meadow on a regular basis.
Just a couple of weeks ago, I was with a group at North Arboretum, and a coyote ran right across the paved path in front of us at a really fast pace.
Okay, for those of you on Zoom, Debbie is telling us that someone saw a coyote at the Morris Arboretum running right across the pathway with a group that was touring there. Yeah, they are. I mean, I've read about coyotes being, you know, downtown LA and Chicago and things. So this is nothing. This is nothing new. In the back. Oh, shucks. How is it possible to get the images that we have for this book? Is the question. And it's different in almost every case. Sometimes you sit and you watch and you wait and you watch for something to unfold in front of you. Other cases, you will catch something out of the corner of your eye and you will say, okay, that animal has seen me, what's going about its business. So what I'm going to start doing is taking photos to document that I actually saw it. So if I saw a coyote, even though it wasn't a great shot from a distance, I'd take a photograph right then and there to document the fact that, yes, I did see a coyote. Then what I would do, if it was stationary, is I'd take a few steps, stop, take another shot, take a few steps to get as close as I possibly could get. In other cases, flip over a rock, flip over a log, something like that. For that, then you want a different lens than you would have for the bird shot. You'd want a macro lens. So having two different lenses on your person available is can be important because you're not going to get the shot you want of the salamander with a telephoto lens. I showed a photo of two turtles. One was a painted turtle. This is the question. What was the other turtle? It was a red-bellied turtle. The red-bellied turtle is quite a bit larger. And the painted turtles are found at the meadow. I don't think the red-bellied turtles have made it there yet. I may be wrong about that, but those you can see in the creek. Was another question in it.
Yeah, there's a pond that is in the Dixon Meadow, fed by Wissahickon, or is it just get water and rain?
It is the pond. The question is the pond at the Dixon Meadow fed by the Wissahickon? And the answer is no. It's fed by rainwater. The water comes down the hill from the hill at White Marsh. It goes through a channel now. They've kind of diverted it, well, not diverted, but allowed it to converge in a rocky channel and go over it has to go over what's called a gabion wall, which are large rocks, sort of like a dam, and they are held together by wire baskets. So it slows it down. The main idea is slow the water down, create places for it to seep into the ground, create a standing body of water. Otherwise, all of it would have rushed across the street and added to whatever flooding was taking place in the Wissahickon. There was somebody in the back there. Okay.
What's your favorite season to explore the Wissahickon and why?
What is my favorite season for exploring the Wissahickon? I would say spring, because lots of things are changing. You notice things in the spring, and it happens over a very short period of time. Like the trees that are leafing out, that are flowers that are blooming, that happens quickly, and so you really have to be paying attention to what's going on. We miss a lot of that. And in the summer, everything is green, stuff is hidden. It's hard to see. So spring would be my favorite time.
That meadow is the green ribbon, and if there are, will it change the meadow at all?
Are there plans to connect the Green Ribbon Trail to the meadow? Yes. And I'm not the person to ask about that. I would say there are people who are far more knowledgeable about how that's going to actually work. Will it change the meadow at all? I doubt it. Because basically you're going to walk from the meadow to go to the Green Ribbon Trail, and I'm not sure that there's going to be much traffic in the other direction. But again, I'm not the person to ask. Some years ago, I decided on St. Patrick's Day to hike the Green Ribbon Trail from start to finish. Yeah, Green Ribbon, St. Patrick's Day, and ended up at Halligan's for a Guinness and shepherd's pie or whatever. It was a nice day. When I got halfway maybe, well, in Ambler, I stopped to eat at McDonald's. And looked at the calories for, of the meal, of the Big Mac meal, and I figured out how many calories I was going to burn that day. I could have had 2 Big Mac meals and not gained any weight. Over here.
Due to the fact that we have a large number of deer in the area, we're having trouble with the greater part with them eating the indigenous plants, but letting the things we don't want to grow. Is there any policy with what they're doing? Dixon Meadow to prevent that?
Question is there any policy at the Dixon Meadow that would deal with deer eating native plants? And the answer to that is no. Because there's no way to keep them out. They can access the meadow. They're not very prominent there, though, at the meadow. The deer, they're around, and they're in the farm fields around the meadow, but they don't spend a lot of time, at least what I've seen, they don't spend a lot of time in the protected area of the marsh, and that they do much better out in the agricultural fields. They're browsers for the most part, but they'll graze a little bit out there like cattle. And there are people who have seen the coyotes out there with the cat running among the cattle. They don't care. So the deer, they don't want to be out in an open space with predators. So maybe the coyotes will. Yeah. Okay. Maybe the coyotes will set the policy. There was another question. Okay. Have I ever heard of any reports of copperheads, venomous snakes, in the Dixon Meadow? No, I'm not. The closest I've heard of copperheads is out in Berks County, There's the Burke's Nature Center, I believe it's called. It's just outside of Reading. And I know that they have copperheads there, but no, never heard of anything locally.
The meadow is a rather secluded area. Have you had problems with illegal dumping?
The question is, have there been problems of illegal dumping at the meadow, at the Dixon Meadow? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm a visitor to the meadow just like you are, except that, you know, I spend time speaking about it, but I don't work for the White Marsh Foundation, and so I'm not privy to, you know, that sort of information if it was a problem, but I've never heard that that's the case. Oh,
I do have a couple of questions on from the Zoom viewers.
okay.
I come over. We have one question from Robin asking, how often is the meadow mowed and what month?
My understanding is that it's mowed in the fall. I don't know exactly what month, and I think that's the only time that it's mowed. I may be wrong about that, but they also plant in the fall. New plants are put in the fall.
And then another question from Robin, how are invasive plants dealt with in the meadow?
As I understand it, there are two ways of dealing with them. One is basically manually, and the other is with the herbicides that are, you know, not toxic, or a lower toxicity to other plants and animals.
Mm-hmm.
But I probably am not the best person to answer that question.
And then we had a couple comments, one about how bird collisions are really a danger to the bird population, and sharing just some information about from Bird Safe Philly about things that we can do to help bird collisions. And so we can share that with everyone in the follow-up email that includes the recording. But I think those are all the questions I have. Let me refresh one more time. Oh, one more from Mindy. Can Bill please specify where to see the bald eagles near Bethlehem Pike?
The place that I would go to see bald eagles behind the it's a professional center on Bethlehem Pike near Stenton. Does anybody know the name of the center? The Commons, Flourtown Commons. That's right. Okay, yeah. Behind there is the trail that leads and connects with the Green Ribbon Trail, and there's a trestle that many people gather on to watch birds of all kinds, because you're up at treetop level, and so the views that you get of any birds are straight on. And oftentimes, if the bald eagles are not flying overhead, they will perch in. They like the large sycamore trees that are there because they're growing close to the water, and they will sit up there, perch up there, and look below to see where their next meal is coming from. That's probably the best place.
I took the Erdenheim farm tour a couple weeks ago, and there is an eagle's nest right along Wissahickon, but you can't see it from the road. You need to be part of the tour because it's part of their private land.
Okay. So this is a statement rather than a question, that there's an eagle's nest on the Erdenheim farm property off Stenton Avenue and Flourtown Road. It's right over the Wissahickon. You can see it but it's dangerous to be doing so because you're driving and you should be watching the traffic coming in the other direction. But in a few weeks, you won't be able to see it because the leaves will hide it. It's an active nest. There was an eagle found dead several weeks ago, originally believed to be one of the pair, but now I understand it was not. It was another bald eagle. Cause of death, I don't know, but the pair has been producing and fledging young for the last few years. And so every so often you might see a young eagle, which you might not recognize as an eagle because it will not have the white head. It'll be a dark, all brown bird. Those birds will have to disperse because otherwise they're going to be competing with their parents for territory. And after the eagles fledge, there's really not as much reason to be around the nest anymore because they're not caring for babies. But they start in in February, late January, starting to refurbish the nest a little bit and prepare for you. They're not quite as early as the great horned owl, but they're early breeders. And yeah, that nest is still an active nest.
I just saw a juvenile eagle actually on the Wissahickon right at Wise's Mill Road. So, they're here.
Yeah, the eagles, it takes them 4 to maybe 5 years to get the white feathers on their head.
Where's the source of the feather in your neck?
There are 2 feathers in my cap. One is from a crow here, and the other is from a white nape raven from Mount Kilimanjaro. And my college classmate and I, to celebrate our 70th birthdays, we hiked and we climbed Kilimanjaro because we're idiots. 70th, yeah, that was a few years ago. Yes, we made it. I would say half the people in this room could make that climb because it's a question. It's not a climb. It's not a technical climb. It's a hike. And the key to doing it, if you can do 5 miles a day, you can do it. The trick is, the key to making it is to spend 2 days between 12,000 feet and 15,000 feet so that you acclimate to the, because if anybody's been to the doctor or the hospital recently, first thing they do is they take your pulse ox, they put on that little thing on your finger and it reads 95, 96, something like that, right? That's because you're able to, your body's able to get 95, 96% of the oxygen that's in the air. We're used to it. If you did the same thing with somebody who's living in Denver and on a daily basis, that would be their pulse ox, right? They can do that. They become acclimated to it. When you're climbing Kilimanjaro, the first thing they do is they take that reading at 6,000 feet. It's fine. Next evening at dinner, they take it again. That's down to 92. Then they take it again next night, and it's down to 89. The night before we summited at dinner, they took mine and my friends. His was 81. Mine was 79. Okay. And I asked, is this going to be a problem? And they said, no, it won't. We were taking, well, at the start, we were taking medication for, to prevent altitude sickness, but it makes you pee a lot in the middle of the night. And who wants to get up when it's freezing cold and go out and pee? So we stopped taking the medication, but we drank quite a bit. Water, no alcohol. And the night before you make this summit, the day before you make the summit, you get up to 15, you get back up to 15,000 feet from wherever you started. And you quit early in the day. And you take a nap in the afternoon. You have dinner. You go to sleep. And they wake you up at 10:30. It's pitch black, it's freezing. You get dressed, you pack all your stuff, give it to the porters, and you start hiking up to 19,000 feet. You hike all night long. Because when the sun rises the next morning, you're at the summit. If you make it. And they tell you don't look back, because all you'll see if you look back is a string of lights coming up, everybody with their headlamps. Okay. And just look at the people, the person's feet in front of you and where he or she is stepping. And that's all and you have all these ideas. Oh, I'm going to put on my Cornell hat, or I'm going to put on my, Wissahickon, Friends of the Wissahickon t-shirt. It's freezing cold. You get your photo done, and now you go down, and it took you 6 days to get there. You're down in 2. Because it's just a straight shoot down, and you want to get down so you can have that beer. Anyway. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, it was the first item on my bucket in the memoir. First item on my bucket list was climbing Kilimanjaro. And so I checked that off. Another item was writing a second book. I can check that off. I've got a bunch of them to go.
Great job. Plowing through. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone on Zoom. Everyone have a great night. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you for Jody Pinto in May.